Submission of Big Walnut Local Schools to inspire and guide each student to his or her maximum potential. And I'd like to call this meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jeremy, if you wouldn't mind doing the roll.
Mr. Crowell?
Here.
Mrs. Dorsch?
Here.
Mr. Fuji?
Here.
Mrs. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mr. Ross?
Here.
Thank you, sir. Item 6.1, it's recommended the board approve the minutes of the February 11, 2021 regularly scheduled board meeting. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Leanna.
Is that on the 11th?
Yes. Any comments or discussion on the meeting on the 11th? Jeremy, whenever you're ready.
Running slow. Give me just a second. All right. Mr. Fuji?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorsch?
Yes.
Mr. Crowell?
Abstain?
Mr. Schneider?
Abstain.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Item 6.2, it's recommended the board approve the minutes from the February 18, 2021 regularly scheduled board meeting. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Leanna. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Sherry. Any comments? Whenever you're ready, Jeremy.
Okay. Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Dorsch?
Yes.
Mr. Crowell?
Yes.
Mr. Fuji?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Abstain.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
All right, I believe that brings us to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Before we get into the items there on the agenda, I just wanted to say, in addition to Addison and Molly, who we're going to recognize in a few minutes, I'm also happy to introduce Ross Lindfat, who's going to be coming up in a little bit. We'll tell you a little more about him, but he's going to be our new Director of Student Services, so we're happy to have him here tonight as well. And with that, we'll go ahead and move into academic achievement. So we have visitors from the middle school this evening, Mr. Josh Frame, our principal, and I'll let him introduce any staff he has with him, the director there, and Jimmy Bales, and he'll be sharing his building presentation as well as CIP update today.
Good evening. Thank you again for this opportunity. I'm going to invite Mr. Rucker to come up here. Actually, I'm going to move over there. And we're going to talk tonight and share information about our advisory program, which is a social emotional learning opportunity specific to Character Strong. We've also provided you guys with a folder with additional information in there. But we're going to jump right in with a little fun and participation with Mr. Rucker.
So what we like to do with these Character Strong lessons that we do once a week in our school is do just a little bit of an icebreaker. So what I would like to have is, by members of our board or anybody sitting up there, is a couple volunteers for what's going to be called the Deck of Destiny. Any takers on this? Very simple. You just answer a question. You got 10, 15 seconds to kind of just rattle off whatever comes to mind. So I don't see any takers. So Miss Lee, if you would please, all you have to do is just choose any card, ace of spades, 10 of diamonds, whatever you would like.
Don't forget, this is a public meeting.
Okay. We'll do the diamond. And we'll do 2.
So your question is, what's something you would like to be widely known for, and why?
I would like to be known as somebody who is ethical and honest. And because I think those are 2 important qualities for someone to have.
Wonderful. Mr. Buskirk, if you would, choose a card.
Let's go,
King of Hearts for Mr. Busker.
all right, King of Hearts.
King of Hearts. What's your favorite piece of clothing you have had or have, and why? Remember, 10 or 15 seconds, Mr. Buskirk.
All right, so I have a wonderful sweatshirt that is soft on the inside, and while not incredibly flashy, super comfortable and keeps me warm. So it's my my favorite piece of clothing,
Wonderful.
other than the suit jacket.
You look very nice. So again, what these do, they just kind of get the ball rolling on a lot of good discussion that we do in these advisory lessons. And basically where this came from is Mr. Frame and I last year was talking about what can we do to start teaching the whole child and do a little bit more with the SEL, because it's very important in our schools. And we were lucky enough to create a committee within our staff that looked into several different pieces of curriculum, and we kind of decided on Character Strong. We ran a couple of trial lessons last year, and then the pandemic hit. But because we had already had the ball rolling with this, we decided that our kids are going to need this more so than ever. And so this year we kind of hit the ground running. Again, it was decided that we was going to do one lesson a week, and it was kind of up in the air. Do we do one a month? Do we do two a month? But really our staff kind of decided that once a week they would spend 25 to 30 minutes once a week in our advisories going through and teaching these lessons. Okay, so in your packet you can kind of see there's a sample lesson in there. I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about what each lesson looks like. But the beginning and the end of each lesson begins and ends with what's called a character dare. And that character dare just challenges our kids to go out and do something. And it could be something as simple as hold a door for people for the entire week. It could be something as going up to one of your teachers and saying thank you for something that they've done. But it's just one of those that it spurs more conversation. At the end of that lesson, they are introduced to the character dare, and then the beginning of the next week's lesson, that's what they talk about a little bit. And it may be a challenge for some people because maybe they didn't do that character dare for that week. But what it does is it spurs more conversation because it's, well, why did you choose not to do that lesson? If you had done it, what would it have looked like? And so then that leads into the lesson for that week. I've chosen one based on respect. And so what that looks like is typically the lesson opens up with some sort of discussion. And this question really hit me because I think that it can really lead to a lot more broader discussion, get a lot of kids involved. And the question is, when is a moment where it would be good or respectful to say nothing? And when would it be a moment where it would be respectful to speak up? And so I think you would have a lot of kids that maybe not at first are willing to speak up, but once one person gets active with that, it leads to, again, a much bigger discussion in that class. Each Character Strong lesson is kind of set up to say, hey, you should spend about 5 to 7 minutes on this. But our teachers know that if the discussion is going and it's fluid, carry that on for the rest of the lesson if it has to. If not, again, that will take them into some sort of activity. Most of what we are doing this year is based in what's called the 2020 lessons. It's a series of lessons that they created where it builds in social distancing. It's not as much partner work as what you would see in most of the activities. But again, it gets our kids engaged, learning from one another, and it's talking more than just about what they learn in their ELA or their social studies classes. It's what's going on really in their lives. And then at the end, it's always an exit intentionally. And what that exit intentionally usually is some sort of quote, some sort of inspirational video, a very short clip, a picture of something that kind of takes them in then through the rest of the week to kind of challenge themselves to do that character dare that again would follow up the very next week. So you've heard a little bit about Character Strong from me, but we thought it would be best for you to hear from our staff and our students that have been involved in this from day one.
I like Character Strong because it teaches kids how to be more kind and care about themselves more. And it teaches you how to be nice to others, and it just teaches you how to be a better person.
I like Character Strong because people get to share their mind and speak their own opinion, and it kind of helps me like speak out into the class when I get called on.
Alright, I really like Character Strong for a lot of reasons. One of my favorite things is that it gives us a chance to talk to our kids about things that don't organically come up in the classroom, and so it really gives us opportunity to get to know our students in a different way outside of our subjects.
I like Character Strong because it helps me learn about stuff that people usually don't talk about, like relationships and stuff, and such as like not like
hours through the week, and I like it because we get to share each other's opinions.
What I like about Character Strong is that the lessons are created for us teachers, and we can really do anything that we want with those lessons, and depending on what our class is doing that day or how the kids are feeling, we can make adjustments to the activities, and regardless of what we do with the activities, connecting with each other, emphasizing empathy, and really getting to know each other on a different level besides just having them.
I like Character Strong because every classroom is a secure and especially feeling
I like Character Strong because it helps students develop the social emotional skills that they will need to be successful in life.
I like Character Strong because it teaches kids to be kind and do smart choices in life, and it just helps our school out with being good and productive and help with work.
I like Character Strong because I think it's providing students with an overall positive atmosphere where they're feeling comfortable to talk about things, learn important skills. One of those skills would be just assisting in social anxiety or learning about global awareness and the people around them, understanding how they're supposed to foster empathy for others. I think it's also helping the students realize that it's okay to struggle and that everyone around you is struggling. It might be in a different way, but it's important to talk about it and share those ideas with one another. So I think for students, being able to confront those issues and then being able to address them and learn those skills to get through them is extremely important.
So we just know that with these lessons, it doesn't happen overnight, it doesn't happen after a couple of weeks. But there's a quote that kind of strikes me when it comes to this stuff that I think really fits in perfectly. And it's from Jacob Riis, and it says, "Look at a stonecutter hammering away at his rock, perhaps 100 times without as much as a crack showing in it. Yet at the 101st blow, it will split the stone in two, and I know it was not the last blow that did it, but all that had gone before." And that's what we're trying to do, is just knock away day by day to help out our kids as much as we possibly can into the future.
As we continue looking at next year, we will have a number of different curriculum, and because there's so many lessons within this program, have the opportunity to have a different lesson group for 7th grade and for 8th grade, which is really exciting. This is just one part of all the pieces that as we go into this school year, to try and look at how do we build and maintain a positive environment at our school, to include looking at data with kids, talking about rewards and sore carts and all kinds of fun things to try and encourage them to be successful. And I feel like as well as we shift into the academics, one thing as well as you see within our plan is one change that we made within this school year is to look at teaming. Teaming has been a tremendous impact and a great step forward at the middle school. Now with 4 teachers, all sharing the same students, all with the one goal. I gave you a sample of one team vision document that one of our teams has worked through this year, but now it's a group of students, and allows for us to continue to feel small as we continue to grow big. It allows for us, our teachers, to get to know and share their perspectives, in that the language arts teacher, the math teacher, the social studies teacher, and the science teacher all have the same kids, and can get together and talk about what did you learn about a student, how can we adjust things, how can we personalize things to best meet the needs of students, and that's a huge impact for our school that students have seen coming up from BWI, and now looking to use that model within the middle school moving forward. And then as I close, again, there's additional kind of strategies and a lot of thought and effort into those team time meetings that happen twice a week, but really happen in between every class period as staff members get together and talk about how to best support kids, as well as our intervention and support and a number of different things to try and provide the very best experience for our kids at the middle school. We're excited about our social emotional learning support that has happened this year and will continue as we strive to personalize our instruction for our kids each time. So thank you for this opportunity to share tonight.
Any questions for Josh and Joe?
The issue that we had about 3 weeks ago that we all got emails about, was that part of this?
No, that was not part of this Character Strong lesson.
If you could, I'd like a copy of the lesson plan that came out of.
Any questions for them on this presentation? Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm just curious, how willing are students to share during these? I mean, and have you seen a change as the year as you've gotten into them a little bit more? I mean, I guess I think of middle schoolers, that's kind of tough.
Yeah, I think that's based on the content of, really it travels through a design process to try and build up that confidence of people sharing out, right? So you don't start with the toughest question. As we went through the example today, we didn't give you guys really deep personal questions, but then allowing for that opportunity of choice in order for students to participate and building that climate, almost that family atmosphere within the team, but even within that team at the middle school, within that advisory group, more willing to share and open up. My son comes home and shares about the conversations within their advisory of how do they, allow for those opportunities to talk about those core values within Character Strong. And really, it's just, how to be a good friend, how to be a good person, how to be a good teammate is really what it comes down to.
And I know you've hit on this, but with a lot of the isolation that kids have felt over the last year, it's a really critical piece for them to have that relationship and connection at school.
I wonder, Mr. Frame, I appreciate the CIP data that you shared in terms of baseline and progress. I find myself kind of in this theme of how that in general relates to data that you would have seen in the past, particularly around the intervention numbers and the screening reports that you use, which it looks like are Alex, Delta, and Alex and Delta. Star, okay. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, STAR reports. So, in terms of, you're asking for the comparison of,
Yeah.
and outside of, not correlated to Character Strong, but more
Correct.
correlated to
The CIP.
to
and
the
what you shared.
CIP. Okay.
Are you talking like this year compared to pre-COVID?
Mhm.
Only because I've heard him ask other principals.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, and that's what I meant, Josh, I apologize.
No, no.
That's kind of been one of my themes relative to, March to June, and then kicking up, and you shared the August data and the December data, so I'm just wondering how that might look.
Yeah, so our
compared
data teams go through, our goal this year is to try and get,
Thank you.
80% of our kids to that level. I think roughly it's about the same percentages in each of the intervention groups compared to previous years. I think we also have, again, seen and trying to track on, where those groups of kids would be, but it's about the same. I think we went from 2 lunches to 5 lunches, and that has impacted our tiered intervention support program. And so we're trying to identify how do we make some good decisions about, how to, adjusting the intervention and support, to get the biggest impact. But our intervention team, our intervention specialists, they take great pride in those activities. They're the ones digging in weekly to meet with students to have an impact in that way.
Thank you.
And the lunch move was a COVID piece to get less density in the lunchroom. So that's kind of one of those consequences of we wanted to make sure we could have a little more distancing, but then it does cut into how much we can do with intervention.
And we're still giving the intervention, it's just, there's additional barriers that we have to consider.
Anything else for Josh and Joe? Thank you both very much, appreciate it. And that brings up Mrs. Young with our academic
evening.
Good evening.
We are right in the middle of scheduling season. This is kind of that crazy time of year that starts where we're talking about next year, and I think maybe in other industries that sounds bizarre, but we really at this point are really talking about next year. So students at our upper levels in particular have, made some selections on courses. So we have our admin teams and our counseling teams really diving in to those schedules and trying to see what fits and make things work. So 2 classes that I wanted to draw your attention to that will be new classes, not necessarily ads, but we have orchestra. So if you recall, 4 years ago we added orchestra to the district. We started in 5th grade and then planned to have the program Rise Up With. So that was 4 years ago. So those that first group of 5th graders is now in 8th grade. So we are working on trying to make a plan to have orchestra at the high school. So trying to do that as best we can without having to add a music teacher. But as you can imagine, traveling to 3 different buildings and schedules, and that can be a little bit tricky. So we are right in the midst of that right now. And a big shout out to our music department all the way down to elementary. They have been a huge part of this process and really dove in and asked if they could help try and figure out how they could make it work. I'll visit this building at this time or that building without necessarily, hopefully, not having to add. So a huge shout out to them for kind of getting into that groundwork with us. The next class is Intro to Engineering Design, and this is a course through the Project Lead the Way curriculum. Several schools around us use it. The Career Center it's actually their course, but they're going to be doing it in-house. Super exciting to have this at our high school. It's something we've been wanting and frankly didn't have the teaching staff for it or an ability to hire an engineering teacher. So now thankful for the Career Center who's going to be providing that for us. So we have one section of that happening at the high school. And then we also have a pre-engineering, which is like kind of an intro to that class. 4 sections of that at our middle school. So the idea being if we do 4 next year, hopefully that program will then grow into our high school and have more than one section the following year. And that course, the high school course, the Project Lead the Way course, actually leads to a possibility for a SolidWorks credentialing for those students after the year that they can take a test on. So kind of our first dabble in a credentialed course, so very excited about that. The next piece is kind of on the other end of the spectrum is kindergarten enrollment, which I know I spoke about last month. Just wanted to give you an update. We are at 253 kindergartners already, which is quite close to where we are right now with kindergarten, currently enrolled in our kindergarten class, so very big class so far. Remember, we still have to go out, we have, 5 months left until kindergarten starts, so a long way to go to be already at 253. And 21% of those are half-day, which is interesting. That's kind of where we started, I think 4 or 5 years ago when we started full day, and then we had gotten down to about 17%, and right now it's showing 21. That will decrease a little bit when we do entrance screeners, that type of thing. But it looks to be that half-day is a little bit up, which is interesting. One thing I wanted to bring back from last meeting, I believe you'd asked if the pandemic, I think there was this feel, I know I had this feel, we've talked on our admin team, that there are many families of 5-year-olds who kind of kept them back and didn't put them into kindergarten just because of the pandemic and the current situation. They thought, let's just wait a year. So we imagined that there would be a bunch of older kindergartners coming in this year. I thought that. I know that was a question asked here as well. What's interesting is when you look at the enrollment data, that's actually not the case. We only have 17 out of that 253 that have birthdays before August 1st. And all of those birthdays, the majority are July, a couple in June, and only 2 in May, none before May. What's interesting, that's very typical for us to have, for families to keep their July birthday, their birthday children back. That's not abnormal at all. 17 is not a typical. So what's interesting about that is that tells me that 253 is just large because we're growing and really having nothing to do with people keeping them back because of the pandemic. And just a quick update for you, I'll go into this more next month, but just wanted to get on everyone's radar, parents, families, that testing season is upon us. We are required to do Ohio State testing by the state, grades 3rd and up. And that begins on April 13th, which I'll talk about more next month, but just wanted to throw it out there because I know spring break is going to be here before we know it, and it's really right when we come back from spring break. And those tests were not waived because of the pandemic, so we are full speed ahead into those as soon as we come back from spring break. That's all I have for you. Questions?
And I had a question, which I can't believe it was 4 years ago. I remember watching the students come in here,
Yes.
the orchestra students, and present that night. That's crazy, it was 4 years ago, but how many students do we have that have kind of stuck with it and moved through to stick with the orchestra? 'Cause a lot of times it's really cool when you start out and then you realize you have to practice.
Right. Yes, that's so true. And also I think we see when they start to get into sports, that kind of takes over all that practice time as well. But I believe, and Mr. Freeman's still here, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we're at low 20s, 21-ish in our 7th grade and 15 to 20 in our 8th grade. So we're less than 40, around 30-ish between our 7th and 8th grade. And you do, we have more at our intermediate. You see that decline as they get older, like you said.
If you think 4 years ago was fast, think about the kindergartners she just shared, class of 2035.
Yes.
I had another question about the engineering program. Will that be the same instructor who will then travel to the middle school, or is it such a different program that?
Nope, it's the same instructor.
Okay.
Yep, same instructor, so the Career Center hires them but they're here all day. So they'll be, like I said, 4 periods at the middle school, and then we'll travel, or vice versa, to the high school and do the last period. And we've had some Career Center folks do that before, our ag program, for example. It's not abnormal, and our music folks do that as well. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I'm going to pause my report. Mr. Snyder, if you want to take it back over for a minute?
Yeah, we were gonna move recognitions up since we have a little bit of a full slate tonight. So Steve, I think you are up first. For recognition.
I have our high school student. Oh, no, I read that wrong again. I'm sorry. Addison Ham from GRE. I'll get it right in the future. Would you like to come up and join me, Addison? That is okay, right? We do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We just have to stay apart. Is that okay? I'll give you this first, and then I'll tell folks a little bit about you, unless you'd like to tell them about yourself. Well, I've got it written, so how about I go? Is that good? So this is Addison. Addison has 2 siblings, Logan and Scotland. You want to tell me what the nickname for them is? They're known as what? Oh, and Logie Bear. Oh, I like that. But they're known as Irish twins because they were born less than a year apart? Okay, and again, Mom, Dad, I'm just going off the but they're fun to hang out with, and what do you guys like to do together?
Well, they mostly like to play school,
Mm-hmm.
and we sometimes run around outside and we take time, and when it's once in a while we go sledding.
That's fun. And like to watch movies together on the couch? Sounds good. You love, I think, something in particular. You love to play soccer. Yes, what position?
Midfield.
Midfield, all right. So you like to run, too. And you have a particular goal relative to soccer moving forward.
Yeah.
What do you want to do with soccer?
I want to become a professional soccer player.
I love that. And with the last name Ham. I don't know if you know the famous female soccer player's last name Ham. Okay, let's say that they might have been the captain of the national team at one point. All right. So your future is bright in that space. Okay. And then I have a couple of quotes here. If anyone deserves to be chosen for Student Month, it is Addison Ham. She exhibits qualities of a true leader, both inside the classroom and out. Says that your favorite subject is math, and that she loves to challenge herself to get better. In addition to what Mrs. Heiser said, Miss Thomas said, I had the pleasure of having Addison in my Eagles Nest my first year as principal. She was so kind and welcoming and encouraging to all the students in our nest. We need to spend a few moments with Addison to get a feel for how caring she is. If someone needs help, she's the first person to be there. Addison has a very bright future ahead, and I can't wait to follow her on her journey. Congratulations on being GRE Student of the, well, and Big Walnut Local Schools Student of the Month. And my predecessor, the good Mr. President, has handed that out beforehand. It's not quite as exciting as that.
We want to take a picture with Jen.
Yeah, so if you
Oh, yeah,
will,
sorry.
you got it.
Oh, yeah, so if you'd like to, join, Jen and Ms. Young in the next room with the family picture.
And we will have that in the Eagle Examiner next month.
I didn't know if they'd stay around for, sorry. Y'all ask.
So while they're heading out, I'm gonna go ahead and call up Molly Ralston, who's our Big Walnut Middle School student of the month. I'll meet you up front here.
Yay.
Nice, you got the applause light twice. So, I will give you your major award first. And, this is Molly. She is the Big Walnut Middle School Student of the Month. And I think I mentioned to you earlier, when you come to do these things, you try to find something that's engaging to talk about, and we've got a real gift tonight, so I'm really excited to get to that here in a second. So, Molly is the daughter of Katie Lance, and she's a student leader and individual who soars in all that she does, both in the school and in the community. She's the proud sister of Abby, who's a 5th grader at BWI. Molly's known for being kind to everyone, as well as one of the hardest workers in the middle school. She's involved in girls lacrosse and also participates on the diver team. With the classroom, Molly is a student leader and always willing to help others feel welcome to Big Walnut. Molly would like to attend college and pursue a career as an engineer after high school. Any type of engineering kind of stretch your fancy right now?
I have no idea.
I hear there's a program coming to the high school.
Nice, good time.
Outside of school, Molly enjoys riding horses, skiing competitively, as well as spending time with her chickens. She and her sister have come up with some fantastic names for them. And it says here in quotes, very punny. As a purveyor of puns myself, please share me some chicken names here.
Dolly Parton,
Okay,
Dora the Egg Explorer,
nice.
Amelia Eggpart,
Oh, very weird.
Cadbury.
Oh, very seasonal. Awesome. Thank you for sharing a few of those. So hopefully that wasn't too embarrassing for whoever set you up for that, but I couldn't resist. I apologize. Molly looks forward to all the elective classes at the high school, as well as continuing her participation in sports and 4-H teams. She'd like to thank her parents for always being there for her, as well as all of her teachers supporting her throughout the years. We believe that Molly is a model student, both inside and outside the classroom, as she always displays attitudes and values worthy of imitation. We are proud of you. I have a handful of quotes from teachers. I can't read all of them tonight because we have a time limit. The lights go off here at 10. No, I'm not kidding, seriously. So, Mr. Dawson said Molly's a highly motivated student. She does a great job in the classroom, including participation and advocating for herself when she needs clarification. She's driven to be certain, to get an understanding of the concepts, not just the answers. This is going to ensure she'll be a very successful math student for years to come, and an engineer as well. And I'll grab one here. This is Miss Ainsworth. Molly Ralston is one of the most pleasant students I've had in pleasure in class. And having Molly last year, she excelled both person and remote learning. She's a very diligent student who's always striving to do her best. She connects with both her peers and her fellow students. She's always willing to listen, to share about her life outside of school, but also lends an ear to listen to foster relationships with others. A positive attitude, relentless work ethic, and kind demeanor are just a few of the qualities she possesses that she should take great pride in. Like I said, there's plenty more here. For all those reasons, I want to congratulate you as our Big Walnut Middle School student. Grab a picture as well. Thanks for sharing the chicken names. That really made my night. Whenever you want to pick it back up.
All right, sounds good. Just a quick update on COVID. Obviously, there's been a lot going on lately, so just kind of wanted to share a few things. First of all, and I know I've mentioned it a couple times, but again, a big thank you to our health department. They've just been really great to work with through all of this, and just really appreciate how they just are willing to drop anything and answer a question, work through a plan with us, and You know, I think sometimes people get mad at them because they're the ones that enforce some things, but they've actually done a really nice job of being helpful and flexible wherever they can. So they did, as I've shared before, do a vaccine clinic for the county, and many of our staff members were able to take advantage of that, and we will be fully vaccinated as of Sunday. So you're fully vaccinated once you're 2 weeks after that second shot. So that will be on Sunday. So that is one step toward moving forward here for us all. But with that, obviously, being in schools and being around kids who aren't vaccinated, obviously, we're still keeping our protocols in place in terms of masks in the classroom, et cetera. We did get some good news for the high school, and I hope I'm not stealing any thunder, so I won't get into too many details. Are you going to talk about prom and graduation at all?
A little bit.
All right, I'm not going to steal your thunder. I would just say that we got some good news, because obviously prom and graduation have kind of been up in the air for a while in terms of what that would look like. And so we do have a little more latitude, and so we're excited to be able to celebrate our seniors who have had a very atypical senior year. But I don't want to steal Jake's, your name tag says Jacob, and I never call you that. So then I read it, and I call you Jake's thunder. So I'll let him talk a little bit more about that. And obviously he's doing track as well, as we talked earlier. Really appreciate, again, the health department, just a quick turnaround on improving all of our spring plans. And you may not all be aware, but our athletic director, so Mr. Rucker, who's just in here, covers athletics for the middle school, and I think it's all Mr. Shelton back there, our high school athletic director, who'll be talking shortly. The two of them have just done a phenomenal job. The amount of information and detail that they have to put together in plans for athletic events this year, I think people just would not, they'd be mind blown to see the pages and pages of things that they have to do to be in compliance for our kids to be able to participate. So, and not just in sports, but other activities in the building. So just really appreciate all of their time, and we're happy to be kicking spring sports off and able to get all those things approved from our health department. So big thanks to Mr. Shelton, Mr. Rucker, and our health department for that, and all their staff. With that, I am going to have Brian come back up. He was able to be here, obviously, last week during the morning meeting, shared some information on what we're looking to do with a partnership for the turf project. And then as Jeremy and I were kind of working through some details with him this week, felt like we needed to have a little more discussion. So we have pulled that as an agenda item, and wanted to bring Brian back in to kind of share a little more information and answer any questions that you all have after hearing the initial presentation.
First of all, thanks for the kind words. Thank you, I appreciate that. Last year at this time, you know, we were sent home, and then we never went back. That was devastating for our kids and all of our coaches. So it is really exciting right now, leaving the high school every day and seeing kids at the track, seeing kids at baseball, softball. It is super exciting. So hopefully it continues, but right now we're playing, and I'm excited about that. Kudos to Miley and Addison as well. I heard math in there. I might have a passion for math. Many years ago I taught math. And then I also heard swimming, diving and soccer, so kudos to those two. That's a good thing. I shared a potential timeline with you there. We talked about that last week. Thank you for your time last week, by the way. As of this moment right now, we're still going negotiations with NCAA. Hopefully we can iron out some things before our next board meeting, but right now we're kind of working through some things with NCAA right now. That's a potential timeline. With it being moved back until April 8th, there is a possibility that the project could get moved to after the fall season, or it could get moved to spring. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with moving it if we have to do that to meet our timelines. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. Selfishly, you know, nothing hidden here as the AD. I would love to have it for this fall, so I don't have to try to grow grass and sprinklers and things like that. But I also understand too that there's a lot more important things than getting it wrong, and so make sure we get it right the first time. So with that said, any questions from the board or any other update from Jeremy on anything there?
Yeah, and I will just add, we are working on an updated licensing agreement, like was distributed out to the board shortly before last week's meeting. Heard some different pieces that might want to be added, so we are working on getting those in. And we'll plan on in the next, hopefully week, be able to distribute out to the board an updated license agreement that you can kind of review and continue to give any feedback that you might have. So if we're able to, we can continue to work with the NCAA and possibly be able to present that as an approval item then at the April 8th meeting. But like Brian said, we want to make sure that we're getting things right and that there is comfort in the relationship before we would move forward. So thank you.
I guess I would just ask if there are any further questions that we didn't talk about last time, as you had an opportunity to digest, or that Brian hasn't already addressed that you want to have right now.
I've got a follow-up on the question that I asked last week about the background checks. And I got your email on that. However, the email acted like the agreement was with the BWYSO instead of the NCAA. So is the BWYSO affiliated? In what way are they affiliated?
Yeah, they operate through the BWYSO organization. So everything within BWYSO would also be for NCAA for as far as background checks, hiring coaches, that kind of stuff. So they've already partnered with them. They're in partner with them now because they use the grass fields behind the Vineyard Church.
One of the things that I don't want to have get lost in my flurry of questions last time is my appreciation for kind of the thinking that goes in behind this. I think the unique partnership, the chance to really reap some sort of community benefit relative to the dollars of someone else in contribution to that is wonderful. And I don't want like the strength of looking for those partnerships to get lost in all of the questions that I had last time. I do appreciate your response tonight of where that might fit in the grander scheme of things. I definitely get that we would want to have something there for the football team, but even based on this current timeline, right? I don't know this. It used to be an August 1 or a July 31 start time for, and not that any fall athletic program is going to start up on the varsity field necessarily. They start on the practice fields. But this is kind of in a best case scenario, right?
Yes. And they built in some days there. Our first home game is August 20th. We actually have 6 home games this fall. We actually, with soccer this year, they've allowed us to play a week earlier. So we have football Friday night. That's soccer football Friday night, which is actually on August 13th. That's a week earlier than in the past. So the timeline definitely is close.
And is that timeline based on the fact that it's not on an agenda today for potential approval, or is that just what the AstroTurf folks gave you?
That's a really good question. Really what it's based on is permitting. As long as we can obtain a permit from the city of Sunbury, we can start on May 24th. So with April 8th approval, that gives us about 4 weeks to get that permit. That could be the delay. So if that's delayed, then obviously we have to delay the project until a further time down the road.
And is there a trigger built in for if something were delayed, it would be, hey, we're kicking this to the spring?
Yeah, I think the permitting really is the obstacle right now. Once we get through the agreement, obtaining that permit really is the next hurdle we need to get through. So once we get to the permitting, then we can start on May 24th. If we start on May 24th, then AstroTurf is very, very confident that we'll be done. They did build in some days into that, so there is some comfort zone in some of the days that they built into that project there.
Right, and I'm sorry, let me try and rephrase it. Based on permitting or if there was a delay for the start time, is there a trigger that you would say, or that the consideration would be bump this down?
Yeah, the next delay would have to bump it. So if that permitting is delayed at all, we're gonna have to move this until down the road. Is that what you're asking me?
Yes, that.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
The very next delay would be the trigger.
I'm not quite sure how permitting with zoning works, but I know zoning approvals typically last about a year before they have to be revisited. So I don't know if that provides some additional flexibility if you can permit it and have that last over time it so that you could get it for either now or later. So that's just something to think about. I'm not quite sure how that works exactly, but.
I think really it has to do with everything, my understanding is, I'm not an engineer, definitely not an architect or anything like that, but everything that I understand right now is it's all about moving water off the turf field and moving it off safely and efficiently. We have drainage in place now, but getting that permit to move water is really the next hurdle past coming to some kind of agreement on the license.
Brian, one of the things that I left the last meeting maybe still not understanding how, I guess, who is going to be using the field? Is this local, for the most part, to our district, Big Walnut Youth Sports Organization kids who are doing soccer through NCAA? Or would this include the NCAA travel teams? And I know they did talk a little bit about adult leagues, but are those still run through BWYSO or?
That's a really good question. So I'm going to go just take a step back a little bit. So currently, the high school football field, high school soccer field, we pretty much shut those things down year round. They're really not in use at all because we have to put brass on them, et cetera. They're really not used too much now other than for games. So obviously, being able to make that a surface that we can use year round, we would focus first on getting our own 7 through 12 teams on there first. So that's mostly the priority with this partnership, and NCAA has agreed to that, that we would spend majority of the time. The ratio I kind of look at is like a 5-to-2 ratio, that we would spend five that part of that time on the field for our own 7 through 12 teams, and not have to cancel games and et cetera, or even use our practice fields. Then outside of that, the next focus would be on NCAA using it for the rec program. So the first focus would be on our own kids, 7 through 12 kids, the next program for the rec kids. If there's time after that, and right now we're not sure how much time we're even going to be able to rent the field. That's a question mark right now. Is there time for that field to use it to rent to someone else? We're not sure how much time will be available after our school teams take it and after the rec teams take it. And as the rec program goes, I heard some pretty big numbers here in our kindergarten class. As that rec program goes, there's just not going to be a lot of time there. So if there's more time, and could we run it? Yes. But as of right now, the main focus is our school teams, and then the next focus will be for our rec soccer program.
Okay. That was not kind of the understanding I walked out of here with the other day, so I
Yes,
appreciate that explanation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't have the pleasure of the discussion the other day, but I was in the first discussion. And so I guess the key word that I'm concerned about from what I've seen and heard directly is just the rent piece. And specifically in a community where, and I think rightfully so, we've, as a district, have probably been about as flexible as possible with letting mostly youth teams from here, but even other people who have connections into the district take advantage of using our facilities, even if they don't necessarily have a direct connection.
Sure.
And all of those things have been relatively harmless in the grand scheme of things. It's really more just kind of hurt feelings because somebody wanted gym time and somebody else got it. But now that we're going to have some things, and I think this is the same problem that we're going to face at the high school too with the additional turf fields, there's going to be a demand for these. And I think we have to be really clear really quickly about what our policy is around, I don't know, if turf's the delineation, because I think about things like our indoor track that we're building in the gymnasium. There's people that are going to want to have access to that, and the auxiliary gym, the things that, there's so many things now that obviously are our priority first, but there's going to be a demand and a desire from the community. And I'm personally not against helping provide those resources to the community, but I think the equation of how that's done needs to change, especially considering the fact from a turf standpoint that the ongoing maintenance piece, I know that was part of the discussion from what I gathered, and I know everybody kind of knows that piece. And so for me, the construction timelines and things like that are a concern, but what I really need to feel good about is how are we going to manage access How are we going to manage that process? And what's kind of our revenue strategy to try to recoup the best that we can the ability to maintain those fields when the time comes? And I didn't get the vibe from the folks that I talked to that was in a lot of depth and detail right now. And I guess I kind of get that to a certain extent because we're still trying to find out, do we have a dance partner that we can actually go dance with? But for me personally, that's one of the biggest things that we need to kind of at least have a framework in place to be able to push ahead with. That's not having the pleasure of me last week. I guess that's my synopsis of my primary concern.
We agree.
I wholeheartedly agree. Brad and I talked after the last meeting, since he wasn't able to be here, and that was one of the things that we discussed, just, you know, that I feel like going into this, we need more than a gentleman's agreement and a handshake, because we're going to have some really nice facilities that lots of people are going to want to use, and how are we going to, you know, make fair access to individuals and groups and this particular field and all those kind of things, and while recognizing that 10, 12 years down the road, we're going to have a whole bunch of fields that we need to replace.
If we're voicing concerns, my concern and issue is we have to be very cautious that we aren't Sunbury's recreation department and spending the district's monies on efforts to subsidize their rec department.
I guess my comment back to that, I hear what you're saying, and it would be nice if they would build some resources, but at the end of the day, these are our kids and our community, and if we have them available, we need to have clear practices and protocols to Leanne and Brad's points, but, you know, I guess I personally feel that we should partner with our community when we can, because they're our kids too, even though it's rec kids, they're still our kids.
The other concern is, and I understand setting up a fund, but if the field's costing $625,000 now, 13 years from now, it's going to be $1 million. So how much money per year has to go into that fund? And it's about 70 grand.
Obviously, work with Jeremy on that.
Or 13 years from now, the district's going to have to replace the field. So.
Can I speak on that just for a second, please? In our negotiations with AstroTurf and the new high school, when we did the vetting process with all the companies, we asked them to give us a estimated replacement cost based on what the turf will cost in 10 to 12 years. The number they gave us for replacement of the turf field was $300,000 to $350,000. They had a window of $50,000. Keep in mind, we're also going to have a baseball and softball field. They gave us a number on that. Don't quote me on this number, but that number was right around $225,000 for each one of those to replace those fields. So it's not quite 600, but it's still a high number. And then obviously down the road, obviously with inflation, that number could be even higher. But it would be about 300 to 350 based on AstroTurf's when we vetted them in the process to determine the turf company at the new high school.
Yeah, because remembering the 625 that we talked about last week is also including all the infrastructure to get those fields actually to be able to be turfed. So it stands to reason that it would be less than that. But to your point, yeah, I mean, we would need to start planning now on how we save for that.
Or better yet, have it paid over time by somebody else.
Yeah, I agree with Brad. The demand that's already come to me on use of the baseball field, the use of the softball field, the use of the new stadium on the weekends, it's come to me. I haven't committed to anybody at this moment, but obviously the demand is going to be there. We definitely need to clean up our facility use agreement to align to the new fields.
I know we talked about sitting down, Mark, Jeremy, and you and I this summer, once we get the school year closed, to start really digging into that.
Yeah,
And the vibe I get from some of the youth sports folks that I'm connected to, I think they get it. You know what I mean? I don't think they expect that, being able to use the football stadium this past fall is going to be the same way as it would be 2 or 3 years from now. So I think just the sooner we kind of get down that path, the better. But I do think we have an audience that understands that things have to evolve and change a little bit too, so.
Yeah, next couple of weeks here, Jeremy and Mark, and we're vetting a couple software companies to help us manage the facilities. Currently, I'm managing facilities through Google and Gmail and things like that. It's working, but as we expand and grow, we need something more efficient and more effective. So we're vetting 2 companies here in the next couple of weeks that maybe provide some software where everything's already pre-filled out. You go in, you register for a function, and then there's a hierarchy system of approval, turn in insurance forms, make your payment right then and there. It's something that we can move forward in for sure. It will help us be more efficient managing the expansion of our facilities. So Gmail and Google.
Any other questions for Brian? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
As always, if you think of more between now and next meeting, or between now and when we get out an updated agreement, just let us know. All right, that brings up Mr. Schwartz with our construction update.
Okay, this is for Mr. Schneider. I have an excellent presentation. Had to do it, sorry.
That's a fine yoke you've got there.
My grandfather Schwartz
you
is
really
laughing
have
at
to
heaven
do it?
right now, it's all good. Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm gonna do the 3 monthly reports you've seen for almost a year now, probably, or a little more for the projects. Again, as we always do, we're gonna start off with the one with all the images. You have copies of all these, as we always do, next to you. So I've taken the liberty to highlight in yellow a couple things. We can talk about anything on these, but I'm just gonna walk through those real quickly. So in terms of the site work and athletics, and that's actually the image you can see behind the text there, all the foundations are in place for the concession stand. So we actually have something above the grade, above the ground, that you can actually see where that building's gonna be as part of the football complex there. And if you recall, the board approved a resolution to amend BSWC architect's contract to start that additional road design. That actually has also started. We've had some initial meetings and reached out to the village in terms of their process for approval, just to share. Elementary and central energy plan. I'm just going to point out one thing at the bottom, and it really will tie to the high school. We're completing the hydronic piping connections from the central energy plant to the high school. And you may say, what's that have to do with anything? Essentially, it's going to allow us to push hot and cold water over to the high school. In other words, turn the systems on. And that's actually one of the points in our high school here. So that's very exciting. We are actually, as you've heard, already have drywall in some areas. We've actually started painting. We have temporary heaters. This will be the permanent system starting to come on hopefully in the next month is what's projected. So that'll be great. We'll be able to condition a little easier, control what's happening. But that connection has to happen first, and that's what you see there. Under the high school, this is kind of something you can visualize under what happened in March. At the very bottom there, you see walk-in cooler, freezer, and kitchen hood are in. So again, something tangible, something people can touch and feel. But again, if you walk in, the kitchen still has a long way to go. But those are usually put in first, given their size, and you build around them. And then at the bottom there, what I just made reference to, the mechanical system startup. So the rooftop units would start, again, with that piping we just talked about being connected and the ability to push essentially cold and hot water in a simple term to be able to condition that building. So we're still showing a December 1st turnover to the owner, and I'll stop there and see if you have any questions on the overall project.
1 year from now, the athletic facilities will be in use?
Let's see, does it? Well, we have that there. Partly it's for growing season and other things, but essentially it's because the facilities start being finished in the third quarter, growing into the fourth quarter.
We're done at spring sports. I know we talked about this before.
Correct. It has to do with grass and things like that as well.
Would
So it's
they
kind of
still
an
get the old
overall
high
thing.
school in spring, or possibly if things are done, we could do some there? Or we don't know.
Correct. We've talked about using it very early fourth quarter, possibly. We put all the way into first quarter, if you will, 22, just because if we have grass or other things that kind of kick us or something should happen, we wouldn't start using them full bore. We can't use any of them technically until the bathrooms in the high school is done, which again rolls into December, if you will.
But you're talking about March of
Yes,
'22.
right.
So it would
Correct.
be next spring.
Correct.
Move in January. So we would talk
But yeah, the
about.
restrooms would be
Yeah.
good to go by then.
Correct, we
done
could
right
start
away.
if everything went perfect as early as December,
Yeah.
in theory.
Just
This is-
not guaranteeing or promising any fall sports over there.
Correct.
Exciting.
Anything else on the?
You wanna hang around another year, Jacob?
So now we're gonna go to the one pager. This is always the contingency of Gilbane's. I've only, there's a couple yellow highlights at the bottom, and this one I do wanna focus on for a second. I have a feeling there were some questions. So with Gilbane's construction contingency law, go to the very bottom, page 1 of 1, and you'll see they are negative 9%. Now you may say, great, does that mean we owe them money? Are they gonna ask for money? What does this do to our bottom line as a district? This is the infamous R of CM at risk. This is their risk. Built into their contracts is all this contingency. It is theirs to manage with the architect and district's approval each time they want to use it. But should they go negative, which they're currently forecasting, they have to start using their fee. So we do not have a financial risk, if you will, to give them money or make up this delta. Now, I will remind this body, the CM of their own accord, very graciously, gave up 160,000 plus of their contingency when the high school GMT was awarded. We were pretty tight on budget at that time, so I'm not asking for that back. They, of course, have asked it. We're not in any means have to give them back, nor do we have the means necessarily when we look at our contingency currently. But they did give us $160,000 back, so if they had that, they'd probably end up in the black, no problem. But we've already gotten some money back from them. This is our money. They use it as our approval, but it's built into their contract. But again, now that they're negative, it's theirs to make up the delta with their fee or otherwise. We do not have onus to give them any money to keep them afloat, if you will. The things in yellow, just to point out what they are, they're fairly sizable. The millwork scope at 150,000 and the metal column cover scope at 120,000. Just as they do with ours, they've built in kind of a worst case scenario. These are two components of scope that essentially, in simple terms, they lost track of during the bidding time. They had it in two different bidders, and then when they awarded their contracts, they didn't assign it to either of them. So they don't have either of these in anyone's contract, is what they've come to realize in the last month or so. We're working with them to try and see if there's ways we can be more efficient on an end product, maybe to help them out a little bit, give us maybe something that's even better but less costly. But at the end of the day, it's their responsibility to complete the work. So that you can see they're two fairly sizable items that kick them into the red. So I'll stop there for a second. Questions on their contingency or?
Do those gaps pose any schedule challenges?
I've had talks with their senior leadership, again, where we'll have to push a little bit as if we need them to work weekends and whatnot to meet their obligations to complete on time. Right now, they continue to do that, even since this was raised about 3 weeks ago. They've continued to work weekends, different contractors, so I haven't seen any difference in how they're approaching the job. But that's probably the most important thing, as they get a little tighter, just making sure they're still doing their due diligence to stay on schedule where they can. Okay, and the last sorry.
I noticed that under the total column, those two items aren't included in the negative 84,000. So are you saying that once those two items go in there, that they have a deficit of 300 and some thousand?
No, with those two items, they go negative to 84,000. I know the way their totals are at the bottom there, it's a little hard to understand, but their negative is 84,000.
Okay.
It's not, because you want to go the my glasses back on, the 920 minus the 811, and that's not how the math or formulas are working. Those are just summaries. You have to actually add a little bit differently to get to that total. Those are not the math to get to the bottom line, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, I asked the same thing the other day. I'm like, I'm not getting the math. 1 plus 1 does not equal 2. Well, no, that's just this total. That's just this total. You have to go back in. They were showing me how. I'm like, all right, we can get to the negative. So yeah, that is their true negative total, if you will. Okay, we'll go to the last report. This is our contingency, the district's contingency. It's a multi-page report. Just take you to the last page. So we talked about how unfortunately they're negative. We are currently, the only thing I've highlighted of interest at this point is we're sitting at, oops, wrong one. We're sitting at 16%, I believe. Sorry, I counted the last couple. I don't have it here.
Yeah, 16.
Okay.
390,000.
So we're sitting at 16%. I guess just to share, we're at 19 in January, 18 in February, and now we're at 16. So I'm fairly happy that the additional cost, if you will, as I naturally should, are going down. So our rate of expenditure should start to go down. I'm still concerned we'll be a little tight near the end of the job, probably make it through the summer, but again, as it stands now, I'm happy to see we're starting to slow down a little bit in terms of our expenditures. Any questions on that? And this does not include, we'll get to that in a second, this does not reflect what's up for a resolution, the amendment to the CM, just to show, or I'm sorry, the commission. I remember Ms. Sherry's question last time. This is not reflected. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Doug. All right, Mr. Cooper, Human Resources.
Doug cooked my excellent line. I can't use that now.
Sure he did.
That was shellfish of him. I could go all night.
Well, tonight's Human Resources report, one thing I did want to come back to the board on in talking about our staffing, our 10-year staffing report. It was asked a couple months ago in part of all of the other things we've been working through and sharing with the board. One of the questions was related to restoring positions that were originally cut with the reductions. And so I did want to report to you really quickly on that. In looking back to what has been restored versus what is still out there unrestored, the unrestored portion of that, which actually are all included within this 10-year staffing plan, three of the positions are elementary counselors that we had that were RIF'd at the time. There was a middle school family consumer science teaching position at the time. Now, that's one that probably arguably we could say, well, we did add a global studies position this past year as an elective. That might be a way to look at that, as we likely wouldn't be bringing back a family consumer science as an elective. But then looking also at a marketing teacher at our high school level, we also had 5 library support positions, 3 of those elementary library supports, a middle school and a high school library support at the time that were RIF'd and not brought back until within potentially this 10-year staffing plan. And then there was a communications specialist administrative position, and with that we would kind of count that as kind of half restored, in that we do have a contract for some communication support, but it is not a full-time position within the district. So just wanted to share with you, those are all unrestored positions that were in the district back in 2008-09 that were cut in 2010 that are still unrestored as of today. Looking at tonight's items, business items down there, and starting at 14.1, I'm going to actually hand this right over to Angie and ask perhaps Ross to come up at this time, and Angie to introduce him at this time.
You didn't have an egg joke, Ross?
Yeah, no.
You have an egg joke ready? No?
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Tired.
All right. Well, pending your approval tonight, happy to introduce you to Ross Linscott. And as we've talked about a lot over the last few months, we know Mrs. Lawrence is departing for retirement. And so again, we wish her well, and I know we're all excited to welcome Ross in to take her place. Well, not take her place, but fill her role. How's that? Ross has a nice blend of experience. What we like is he actually started his career in Cardington, which many of you know is a smaller district than ours. So he has that side where the admin team's very, very small, makes ours look huge, where he served as a psychologist and also as an intermediate school principal. And then has been since at Olentangy as a pupil services coordinator over there for 8 years. And so obviously they make us look tiny. So he's kind of seen the two different ends of the spectrum, and we think that gives him a really unique perspective to bring some ideas in that he's maybe learned in other districts, but also to kind of know what's reasonable to work in a district our size. So we're really excited to have him. Has some good experience in training that we don't currently have with other folks in the district. We're certified in CPI. We're the trainer over there, so we currently have to bring somebody in to do that, so that would be one example. So just excited to have him here and welcome on our team. Welcome him to our team with your approval here tonight. And if you want to say anything briefly?
Yeah, I'm beyond excited about the opportunity to join this wonderful district. When I lived, or when I worked in Cardington, I actually lived right over here on Prairie Run Drive. And then our family grew to a size of 4, and kind of outgrew that house, and we moved over into Delaware where we're at now. But I know quite a few in the community. We had attended Sunbury Christian Church for quite a long time, so excited about the opportunity to join this great district and continue the excellence that's already been started here in Morris Place. It's some big shoes to fill, but looking forward to getting started. So, thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
I think she's only about 6.5, 7. All right, continuing on then in item 14.2, we have another long-term sub. As you know, at the beginning of this year, we had several leave of absences approved for the year. This is another situation where we have a sub that is hitting that maximum, or has hit that maximum for being approved to the Bachelor Step 0 pay. 14.3, we have several 90-day probationary contracts in our classified groups that have reached the balance of the year contract time. And then 14.4, asking for an extension on the leave of absence for Gene Simpkins through April 15th of this year. And that is all within the allowable contractual items there. 14.5, approving a leave of absence for Julia Blair as a bus driver. Beginning at the, and notice there it's at a half day, and that's when the total amount of leave runs out. So that's why there's kind of an interesting take on that with a half day through March 10th is when the official time would begin. Under 14.6, a few volunteers, and again, I stress this every single time. We truly appreciate all the volunteer support for all of our athletic teams as we go into the spring season here. Some of our baseball and softball volunteers here. Just a tremendous amount of support that they provide to our kids, and truly appreciate all of that. Under 14.7, just asking you to notice a revision there from a full contract to a half contract for that coaching position. And then under 14.8, recommending the resignation of Abby Thomas, who is currently on a leave of absence, but we'll be sad to lose her. She's been a great science teacher for our district over the last few years. So certainly wish her the best as she works to take care of the family that she has at home. So those are all the items here for this evening. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And that is all I have tonight.
All right, thank you. We took care of recognitions, which means it's time for the treasurer's report.
All right, so just going quickly over how we looked in February. We are about 1% above on our revenue. With our final settlement this month, though, we are going to probably see our property taxes slightly below estimates, but still pretty close to where we would expect. So I'm still feeling very good about where we will end the year revenue-wise total. And then just another reminder that we still have our outstanding January premium for medical, which is a sizable amount. So you may look at the expenses and how much we're under, but more than half of that is made up by that premium that we're still working with the insurance company for them to correct their errors so we can pay that. So at one of these months you'll see a large jump in that line. Other than that, we're looking good for the year. Any questions?
Chairman, could you just give a very quick surface level, not to put you on the spot, but I know we just talked about Eagle Examiner, but just maybe a little context of how our fundings have balanced, our PUP funding has balanced out with the federal dollars?
Yeah, by kind of my view of what we've gotten in stimulus money and the cuts that we've gotten from the state, we're essentially, with that and the PPE that we bought from some of the stimulus money, we're basically about flat. And what I mean by that is when we look at what we were cut last year, plus what we still have not gained back in our cuts for this year, it's around $800,000. And the stimulus money, the three different ones that we've gotten thus far, is around $1 million. Of that, all that stimulus money, about 200,000, a little more than that, but about 200,000 has gone towards our masks, social distancing, sanitation supplies, all of those things that we've been trying to do to make sure that we have safe and clean facilities and able to meet protocols. So you might hear of other school districts that have all these funds, and what are they going to do with it? We're not at that point right now. And I will also just remind you that as part of those cuts, the state took into account those stimulus dollars and what we were going to get back last June. So they, in my opinion, they were kind of telling us that use those funds to make sure that you're keeping people employed. And that's what we've done with some of our positions too, is we've used those stimulus dollars to make sure that we are able to operate and keep positions, so.
So just to summarize that, using federal funds to pay
Cool.
people because we lost the state funds.
That is correct, yep.
And I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that. And Jeremy wrote a really nice piece, if you haven't had an opportunity to see it yet, in the Eagle Examiner, that I would encourage everyone to read, because again, I think as we're hearing in the media that other districts are getting a lot more in those federal dollars, there might be the misperception that we're getting a lot extra. But unfortunately, because again, we're considered high wealth by the state, we are cut at a disproportionately higher amount, and the money that we get back in the federal dollars is lower per pupil than what a lot of the other districts in the area are getting. So just want to continue to share that as we move into some of these other conversations. And again, wanted to point it out because Jeremy wrote an awesome article in the paper. If you have not had a chance to see it, please check that out.
And if I remember correctly, that was actually a cut that was also disproportionate to colleges and universities in the state of Ohio.
That is
as well.
correct.
We took a much higher percentage hit
Yep.
than any of those institutions.
Yep. So the next piece, as part of mine, I just wanted to give an opportunity to revisit. I know I handed out some updated numbers, trying to look at what has changed since the November forecast to now, updated that, as well as some kind of just potential scenarios for future funding. And I just wanted to provide another opportunity now, a week later. You've been able to digest kind of what we had there, and wanted to make sure that I was available and able to answer any questions that the board may have.
Jeremy, one question I had, I guess, just to make sure that I'm understanding what you've provided us correctly, that if we chose not to go on the ballot this fall, and on page 4, that the understanding, if we would choose to wait until May of next year, that's where we're falling into that FY 2023 with the particular number of mills that you have listed there, and then kind of talking about where our cash balance drops off. Is that correct?
That is correct. So just a reminder, I mean, we've been talking about seeing those negative balances. If you think about the graph I always show where you're seeing the line kind of drop, we've been seeing that drop. And as we continue to see that, the longer you wait to address that is then you're needing a larger ask. So yes, what you're seeing there is needing more in May because it won't be collected. Actual collections wouldn't start until actually January of '23. So you're always kind of, you're waiting until that next January, even if it was approved in May.
And I thought I'd had it written down, but I don't. Can you talk again about the timeline of if we're looking to place something on the ballot this fall, that timeline of when
Yeah.
those decisions have to be made? And I'm
Tell you what,
sorry,
let-
I thought I had it written
Yeah,
down.
let me pull up the actual email unless Angie beats me to it.
Has to go on, it has to be at the BOE by August the 4th, and I believe it's 80 days before that, you have to send it to the auditor for millage verification.
We talked about June and July.
Yeah, what we were talking about, I'll get the exact dates for us, but what we were looking at would be, we would approve one resolution for the millage in June. That would then go to the county auditor to be certified, and that would mean then a July for providing all of that to the
To be
Board of
voted on.
Elections by August.
Forwarding it to you all so you have it.
Thanks, Angie.
Is there any chance that we will be receiving additional funds that, I know we've talked about some of these positions being really important to figure out where we're going to start this next year and how we're going to do, how do we do that? Do we go into the hole hoping that we pass a levy? I mean, is there any additional funds that we can potentially expect from the federal government that may help us until, or do we have any sense of that at all?
Yet to be seen what the amount is. But you may recall from the news the last couple weeks that there's I guess it technically would be a third. I think the second one was in December. Third, there is supposed to be an amount going to schools. What I've heard in the kind of the school finance community, it's larger than the what we got in December. So there could be, if we want to call it bridge funding, if we did choose to do some of these initiatives, that we could use those funds for. Always cautioning though that if we did not get the funds though to continue using or to continue covering those costs, then we would have to obviously not continue to provide them. But yes, there is supposed to be another round of stimulus money coming to us from the federal government from the most recent approval.
And again, that would be to offset our already deficit spending for one time.
Correct.
I think we are at a point, because we're looking at March 18th, we won't see you all again unless you call a special meeting and want to see us until April 8th. And so just with thinking about some of these positions, I know one in particular is a psychologist. Those are very hard to find. So I think we're at a point, I know we've talked with Mark quite a bit about, here's kind of what we're recommending. We just need to know your comfort level. I know we talked a lot about goals for the district and some of that staffing, especially with goal 2. Where is your comfort level in using some of that savings until we can pass the levy to move forward with some of that? We just are at a point where we need some direction. If we're going to add some of that staffing for next year, we probably need to get moving on it, or we risk, kind of missing the peak of hiring season.
Can you remind us again specifically what positions? I know you just mentioned psychologist.
Yeah, Mark, do you mind coming up and helping with that too?
I know
I have that
have it
document, but he
somewhere.
navigates it much better than I do. It's a 10-year staffing plan.
Thank you.
That's within that 10-year staffing plan, so we would be looking at the ads in there. Where I'm not overly concerned yet is looking at our core teachers, because a lot of that is based off of enrollment. So we're tracking enrollment, especially when we look at our elementary ads. I will say that we're in what I call the orange area right now. The yellows are definite ads, the reds are reductions, and where those watching enrollment constantly, as Jen noted, 253 kindergartners. Last week, we were at 247. So we've added 6 kindergartners since last week. If that takes place for the next 5 months, we're going to have a very large kindergarten class. So we are tracking that on the weekly with every grade level, and then looking at what does that do to class sizes and adds. Where I grow very concerned is this time of year when we're looking at very difficult to fill positions. Psychologist, that's one of the ads planned for next year. We have a nurse planned for next year. We have a mental health / behavioral specialist planned for next year. These are very skilled positions that would definitely take some time, and also ensuring that we potentially could get some of those candidates before the other districts do. Quite honestly, we are all districts are looking at the same kind of ideas here: social emotional learning, counseling support, mental health support. We're not different from anybody else right now, and so the candidates that are out there are going to be out there until they're not there. And so the sooner we can get on that, certainly the better. That does also include, if I pull that up really quick here, that also does include 2 elementary counselors for next year that we did have planned. So we do have a few intervention specialists as well based off student needs, and an instructional facilitator at the intermediate school, instructional coaching for next year. We've already talked through our plan otherwise, but I think that those are the main focus positions. We do have that technology specialist as well. So when we talk about all these very skilled type positions, there aren't a lot of candidates out there that may have that. So that's where certainly there's some urgency, a sense of urgency from my viewpoint on getting moving on some of this.
It's been my experience as a board member that whenever we wait, it never gets easier. And whenever we wait, the options become less.
Sure.
And I've really grown accustomed to the notion that I'd rather be a year early than a year late. And I guess that's where I sit on that. So if you were asking for an individual opinion about whether we should move ahead, I'd rather take the risk and be a year early and have more options to deal with whatever comes from that than be a year late and have less options. That's just one person's opinion.
I appreciate the summary. Those are my words in a different way for sure. Absolutely.
These are newly created positions, and my personal and board member opinion is that we need to have a vote to create it. This board only speaks when it votes. Personal opinions don't matter. So, and I see nothing, if you're asking for it tonight, I don't see anything on the agenda.
Am I hearing you correctly then, in your opinion, that it should be a specific business item to approve the staffing plan for next year? Is that kind of where?
Board policy requires that the board create the position. So,
So I guess we're asking, as we did last week and a couple other previous conversations, if you're at a point where somebody is ready to make a motion to move forward with that.
And I would just highlight as well, none of these are new job descriptions or new positions in that manner. They are all approved job descriptions already within the board of any positions that would be hired for the district. So typically, I guess the way I would look at this is the approval of the positions come to you, but certainly as a board, if you feel that we would like to add that on potentially the April 8th agenda, we could look at that as well, on the staffing plan being approved.
I mean, I expressed it as an opinion, but I also missed the last 3 meetings too, so I don't know what ground you guys may have tread or not tread, so that's why I expressed it as an opinion. I don't know where everybody else has been, because I haven't really had a chance to sync up on that. If it makes more sense to make a motion tonight, then we can entertain that. If it makes more sense to make a motion on April 8th, and we understand what the risks and benefits of that are, I'm game. So are you saying by waiting till April 8th, that puts you behind the game in terms of
The
getting the
sooner the
word out?
better, absolutely. And so, yeah, to Angie's point, I apologize for misspeaking there, but of course, you can always make that motion from the floor as well.
Would you be thinking then that we would, so we'd kind of be approving the positions twice, if I'm hearing this
That's what I was
correctly?
wondering.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused by that.
Yeah, I mean, we started it from a place of general vibe of, are you comfortable with us bringing these to you on an agenda to approve? But we're certainly open to however you would like to proceed with that, just to give us an idea of where we want to go.
Can you follow through on your statement?
Well, I guess what I was thinking, if we're approving the staffing plan, you're approving then for all of the positions on
Right.
that staffing plan to be hired.
No.
And I think we've already talked, that definitely would not be our desire, because if there's not the need for a position, then we, wouldn't hire it.
And that would require additional action at that point.
And then at the point that every position is, just like we'll have at the end of the meeting here, for the HR items, you're then approving those positions that would be on the staffing. I guess I'm just asking for clarification if that's kind of what the desire is, to have it twice. I guess there wouldn't be an issue approving them twice, it just kind of seems like we'd be approving them twice.
You're not approving twice. If I read the policy, the board policy correctly, when you create a position, the board creates it.
But it's not a created position.
Pardon?
A school psychologist wouldn't be a created position. We have that position currently.
So you could hire 100 on the
Don't
premise that
approve the
one was.
hire.
Come to you as
Yeah,
a-
we would still have to approve the hire.
I didn't read it that way. I read it as every new position, meaning new employee, has to come to us.
Correct,
Yes.
every new employee, but that position already exists.
But
So theoretically, they could have not asked any of this, gone out
Mm.
and hired them and put them up for an approval.
Right.
And we could have said yes or no.
Yes,
Right.
and I'm saying I do not read the board policy that way.
Which I think, though, that's what we do with every position that
We
we've
have on
hired.
to- on
And
to
I've
the-
had a
Different than
problem with
teacher.
it all
So
the
we have a
time.
job description for a teacher, so when we hire a teacher, we just bring it to you on the agenda. We have a job description for Director of Student Services, so we're just bringing Ross to you on the agenda because you don't have to create that position. If we want to make up a brand-new position that doesn't currently
Correct.
exist, and it wouldn't be a teacher because that's a pretty general category, but let's say some administrative position that doesn't currently exist, we have to write a job description and then get that approved
As a position.
as a new position. But these are all positions that we already have.
And the way that I hear the question in this space is, it's really about the acceleration of what is currently slated versus what is currently, or the current desire based on a 10-year work plan.
Well, this is what we've scheduled tentatively based on our conversations, and we just want to know, I guess, your comfort level and us bringing those to you as agenda items.
Which started with the 10-year work plan discussion. And there were some refined discussions that
Multiple.
have been at least since. And I know Jeremy and I sat down and talked through some of that this week to kind of catch me up, so.
And perhaps that could be rephrased as a question too. Are there concerns or questions regarding moving forward with the staffing plan as presented to the board and discussed over the last several months? Are there concerns or questions that I can help with at this time? Okay.
Thank you, Mark. That brings us to item 10, select the board policy. It's recommended the board adopt the following policy revisions: 6152, student fees, fines, and charges, and 6325, procurement, federal grants and funds. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's like Leanna, Leanna defers to Sherry.
I'll second.
All right, so as discussed last month, for the most part, what is being added for the student fees is just to make sure that we are hitting all of the items that we need to, some updates as recommended by Neola for the National School Lunch and the Child Nutrition Act. And that is the 6152. And then for the federal procurement, it is adding, as it was finally decided how it could be treated, but for adding to our actual policy, the decision by the state that that we could request a waiver of needing to bid for a highly qualified or a high-performing, I apologize, ESC. So that is added to this policy as well. Any other questions on that?
On the 6152,
Mhm.
I noticed that the funds, in several places, it says to be deposited, and it's redlined going through the treasurer's office. So the first question would be, why is it not going through the treasurer's office? The second question is, where is it being deposited? Is it considered the bank? Because it didn't say.
Well, all funds are deposited with the treasurer's office. And I think that what you are seeing there is an option in option 1 of the policy. We chose option 2 as it is noted, just verbiage. But
It references the bank and says, as opposed to the red line of turned into the treasurer, it's just saying deposited within 3 days as opposed to turned into you within 3 days.
So any funds are, whether deposited into the bank directly, which a lot of our funds are that now, are electronically deposited. But a general term of deposit is being given to the treasurer in some way, shape, or form. And then our depositing policy talks about how it is deposited with the treasurer within so many days, depending on within 24 hours, if it's of $1,000, it's deposited with the treasurer and deposited to the bank, so.
I mean, is this an example, one of the policies where we already have some of these practices, but it's just kind of cleaning up language to match?
Other questions? All right. Mr. Fuji?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorsch?
Yes.
Mr. Crowell?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Brings us to items 11, or item 11, board members' items of interest. I hear there's a prom update.
Yes. I have no egg pun, but.
Thank you.
Very good news. Lots of excitement around the high school when we heard the announcement that it's a go for now. It's obviously more difficult because now we're not just working with Delaware County. But the possibility is still very exciting for lots of people. So, and along with that, graduation being on in person is fantastic news. And of course, it can't be inside, so we have the rain date to go along with that. I've talked about the plays before, and the 3 different plays. The first one is starting this weekend, and then the following 2 will be the next 2 weekends. So the drama club is very excited to finally get to perform. Ms. Young said earlier, scheduling the first round has happened, and students kind of have a rough draft, not in what order their classes will be, but what they're in currently, and they can choose to drop or add from there. And we're pretty just working along through the spring here. Kind of, the warm weather is kind of exciting, getting ready to play spring sports and finish it out strong. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Sherry, anything for this evening?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick thanks to Ms. Bailey at Souders for extending the invitation to the board members to participate in the Read Across America Week. That was the first week of this month. I'm very passionate about reading, and I really appreciated the opportunity to share that passion with some of our young learners. And I really was happy that she gave us some options for doing that. Like, my work schedule wouldn't allow me to do that in person, so she had the idea of doing video. So I thought that was really fun and a great way to, get us involved with some of the students in the school. And thanks to all the teachers in the schools who work every day with those little ones, getting them excited about reading.
What book did you read?
Strictly No Elephants.
Okay.
You sound pretty convinced about that.
That's a good book.
Excellent, thank you. Doug, anything for you tonight?
I read If I Ran the Zoo. The only thing I've got is there was an inference made at last month's evening meeting that the 46 positions eliminated back in 2009 or 10 were due to the recession. And that's not the case. They were due to the actions of this board back then. That's all I got.
Steve?
Sure. I think every month that I've been on this board, -2, which would be January and February of last year, I've spoken about my gratitude for this district and the staff for the services they provide, not just to our students, but to the community. I think that it's interesting as we look across the state at what has been termed responsible reopening, that many districts that we might be neighbors to really just had their first in-person day of school this past week. I would take this opportunity to again express my appreciation to this district's leadership and to the staff for that continued service and for the fact that some of these headlines that we see around, while I recognize every community is unique and has their own kind of qualities to it, they wouldn't be headlines that would be here, such as strife between community and educators, or mentioned in the dispatch, or things about voting to not return to school in person, which would be going on up in Cleveland. I just remain impressed and grateful for that. In addition, I think that it should be noted that it's my understanding the Big Walnut Cheer program earned a state championship.
Yes.
So I think that's pretty exciting as well. Anytime that some of our student athletes have that chance to not only compete but be recognized at a state level for excellence, I really want to commend them and their coaches and the entire program. That's all I have.
Thank you, Leah.
Only thing I had was again to also extend my thanks to Mandy Bailey for allowing us to do the Read Across America. I certainly would have preferred to have been with the students the day that we did that, but keeping visitors out of the buildings this year wasn't able to do that. So I made her promise that hopefully next year I'll be able to actually come to her classroom and read to the kids. So it was a good experience, a little sense of normal, I guess, maybe, but still weird reading to a camera. So, and also, I guess, just to kind of bounce off of what Steve said this evening, too, about the work that our athletic departments have done to make sure that our kids can have a season. I just keep hearing these stories about kids in the news and just not necessarily the best things that are happening with children, and I feel like maybe that some of that lack of structure and lack of someplace to go every day where somebody cares about you and checking in on you, that just so thankful that our kids still have opportunities to participate in the things that they're passionate about, whether it be drama or music or sports, and the fact that we've been able to keep this running. So.
Thank you. I guess the only thing I just have tonight is just a little bit of a personal note. So it's been a rough couple weeks in our house. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody up here for being patient as I haven't been able to be around, and appreciate all your efforts to keep things moving. And that's why it's a board, and that's why there's 5 of us. And so I appreciate you all picking up the slack a little bit when I haven't been able to be involved. So thank you all for that.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Item 12, this meeting of Board of Education and Public for the purpose of conducting school district's business is not considered a public community meeting. This is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. please reference criteria for public participation, which is attached to the agenda. I know we have somebody from BWEA here today, but I didn't catch who was actually going to represent. Oh, Georgia, it's you,
Charles
okay.
Craig is here, and we thought it might be her, but weren't completely certain,
Okay.
so we just put BWA on there.
So George, I think you know the routine. You got 3 minutes to do your thing.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. Initially, I'd written a letter, and I'm going to go ahead and read that because I think it's the most concise. And I've scheduled that to hit all your emails a little bit ago, so you all have a copy of that in your emails. Thank you all for continuing service to our school community during this challenging time. We come to ask you, as BWA, to consider extending some leave benefits of the CARES Act to our members. During the first semester, those teachers who contracted COVID or had to quarantine were able to benefit from the CARES Act and not use their own sick days. The CARES Act provided our members with 10 days of leave. We were all looking forward to receiving the vaccine after vaccine approval in December. However, due to circumstances out of all of our control, we waited until March. We all are very grateful for the work of the district and the Delaware County Health Department in making sure that that happened. Everyone was also waiting to see what the new federal administration would do with regards to extending benefits contained in the CARES Act. Unfortunately, the benefits in the CARES Act regarding leave were not extended. We are asking the board to extend the same 10 days of leave to those members who contracted COVID or had to quarantine prior to being able to receive the vaccination in March. We are aware that this may be a future cost to the district grant these days. However, the initial cost of paying for a substitute teacher for those on leave would not change. For our younger members, the difference between using their own limited sick leave and being granted the days is significant. Members have been teaching in person since August. We ask that the board consider this, as well as the commitment, dedication, and sacrifice that these people have made for our school community. We thank you for your consideration. We're happy to pursue any further discussion on the matter or help facilitate this in any way possible. We did do an informal poll to our members asking them how many of you have either been affected by COVID or been on quarantine. We have about 16 to 17 members. I don't have a specific, we're looking between 60 and 70 days. Right now, the cost that the district, like I said, is when people would not change. The cost would come in the future. And I know that's a big, being fiscally responsible is a big mission for Big Walnut. For me, for example, I've collected so many sick days, I don't collect anymore. So the cost will be thrown in the future as a percentage way down the line. But for our younger teachers, it could possibly make the difference between having 4 weeks paid maternity leave, having 6 weeks paid maternity leave. That is a big deal when we're talking about limited sick leave and having to use it. So I don't know if you have any questions right now. I don't know if this is something the board would like to discuss or how that procedure goes, but we certainly would be willing to discuss anything further or entertain any discussion about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, these are typically just kind of the public comment sorts of things. And so I know we've
Yeah.
got a meeting coming up here in early April after
Mhm.
spring break, and I think that's probably a good time to maybe talk in a little bit more in depth and detail about that, because I think it's hard for us to say yay or nay without
Right.
knowing some more of those details. So I think,
Put that on as a discussion.
yeah, I think I think we can do that for, I can't remember, is that a union meeting before our next board meeting?
The labor relations?
Yeah.
It's the same day.
Same day?
But it would be after that meeting.
Okay. In April, yeah, I think we can have that discussion once we kind of collect some of that, more of that detail. So.
Okay, and let me know if we can be free for a meeting, very flexible, so.
Okay.
Thank
So it'll
you.
be one of the April meetings, and I'll let you know.
Okay.
We'll make sure we.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The 8th or 15th, so we can touch base on that.
So I know that was one, we had submission advance. Did we get anything else that came in?
I did not.
Okay. And then there's the opportunity for unscheduled public participation. I don't see anybody raising their hand or eager to jump up, so. So then we'll move to item 13.1 in the business items. It's recommended the board approve the resolution approving amendment to commissioning services agreement with Brewer Garrett Company to serve as a commissioning agent for HVAC equipment and BAS systems for the new high school. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Sherry. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Leanna.
So we talked about this last week. Again, this just as it says, there's to amend Brewer Garrett, our commissioning agent. They currently under contract for the elementary, the Central Energy Plant, and they also reviewed the high school, because remember that Central Energy Plant feeds that. This is to amend or extend their services to the high school. To do that commissioning, again, the value there is really first and foremost, not only creature comforts, making sure the system is maximized, so people feel comfortable in the heating and cooling season, but also trying to diminish our maintenance costs, our repair costs, and get maximum return on investment in terms of the lifespan of that piece of equipment, so it truly operates 20 years, not 15, which can be huge in terms of our capital replacement costs down the road. So with that, and again, so this is an amendment for the $70,300 to their contract.
In the architect's contract, there's $250,000 as an option.
Correct.
Did we not pick up that option, or
We
is
did
this
not
for
pick up
something
this
else?
commissioning service through the architect, so you're exactly right. There was $250,000, still is for that matter. We haven't fully amended the architect's contract. We'll be coming back next month to amend their contract, basically to remove or recognize that $250,000.
A portion of that $250,000 he's gonna have, but
Correct. What we did as a team, we opted to reassign that money back when we were designing the high school, and we presented that to the board. So of the $250,000, $50,000 of it are essentially what we'll call phase one of the Brewer Garrett contract, the $49,900, if you will, was paid for by that reallocation of funds from the architect's contracts on paper. We have not formally done that in deleting that from his contract. So this is not funded from the $250,000. This, as we talked last time, will first and foremost be funded by rebates we've pursued. So to date, we have a little over $16,000 from Columbia Gas. We have other rebates we're pursuing from Columbia specific now for the high school. That first rebate was the Central Energy Plant in Prairie Run. And then we're also pursuing through Consolidated Electric for all three buildings a rebate. Now, these will not total the delta of $54,000. So again, we have a $16,000 credit. That's a step up on contingency. It's a $70,000 plus contract amendment, so that all those rebates will not total $50,000. I can't sit here and say that. I think we might get another $15,000, $20,000 if we're lucky. But that's what's funding it initially is the $16,000. The rest would come out of project contingency funds. So that $54,000.
Or project, I would probably suggest project interest, since
Correct.
we're already tracking the contingency, so it would be an extra cost, but
Correct.
we're already running tight on contingency, so it would be my recommendation that we apply some interest to pay now to hopefully be saving later through their services.
So did I understand that this contract, this addendum,
Yes.
is being paid by interest money?
We would, not to go too far down, but I think we've kind of looked at some of, when we've been reconciling and looking at budget, that we've been planning on not using all of those services. The
Oh, okay.
the architect services. So I don't want anybody to think that, we've had some various conversations. I think ultimately to your point, Mr. Crow, we had 250 in the contract, and we're definitely less than that on what we're getting here by going through a third party. We've gotten those items that Doug mentioned that help to offset this. But I think we have also accounted for some of that savings of knowing that we weren't going to be using all that 250 as well.
Okay. I just didn't want to pay for it in two different places.
No, we are
Yeah.
definitely not paying for it in two different places.
Anything else for Doug? Jeremy, I think we're good to go.
Okay. Mrs. Dorsch,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Crow,
Yep.
Mr. Fuji,
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes.
And Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Item 13.2, it's recommended board approve the following donations. $500 to the BWFFA from the Sunbury Lions Club, and $500 plus $136.57 at books donated to the Elementary Diversity Inclusivity Library by someone named Sherry Dorff. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Steve with the motion, is there a second?
I'd like to second that, please.
Leanna will go ahead and second that. So normally we have to say thank you to whoever's out there listening, but I guess tonight we can also say thank you here too.
All right. Mr. Fuji?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Crowell?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorsch?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Item 14.1, it's recommended the board approve the 2-year, 260-day administrative contract for Ross Linscott, Director of Student Services, with an annual salary of $100,000 effective August 1st, 2021. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Sherry. Any discussion?
Already introduced it, unless you have any other questions.
That's why I thought to pause for a moment and see if anybody has anything else. If not, Jeremy, go ahead.
All right. Mr. Fuji?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorsch?
Yes.
Mr. Crowell?
Abstain.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. I was trying to find a good way to squeeze that in, and sorry about that. Item 14.2, it's recommended the board approve a 1-year limited certified contract, BA Step 0, effective beginning February 9, 2021, for Megan Matheny to remain in effect through the completion of her current long-term assignment. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Sherry. There's no additional discussion. Jeremy?
Mr. Fuji?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorsch?
Yes.
Mr. Crowell?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Item 14.3, it's
Mr. President, I'd like to move for consent agenda on items 14.3 through 14.8 inclusive.
There's a consent motion for items 14.3 through 14.8 from Leanna. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Sharon. Jeremy, whenever you're ready.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorsch?
Yes.
Mr. Crowell?
Yes.
Mr. Fuji?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Brings us to item 15, schedule the next board meeting, April 8, 2021, 7:30 a.m. right here, and April 15th, 2021, 6:30 p.m. Also right here, and those will still be streaming as always as well.
Could I just add to that, and we talked with Leanna at agenda review as well. We are not going to do the Golden Eagle Awards this year. We're going to put those on pause one more year. We talked about it with our team and with Roush. They're not doing anything in person with them this year. And also often recognizing a lot of the volunteers in our buildings, and so we're going to put that on hold for a year. With that, we normally do the May evening meeting at the high school because of the dinner, which we're going to have. So I would recommend that we move the May meeting back here unless you all have different thoughts, which we can put on the next agenda. I just wanted to kind of throw it out tonight.
I think that makes sense. Do we have to vote on that since that was scheduled earlier on, or is that more about date and time as opposed to
I think it's already a
location?
scheduled one. I think we can change the location, okay, it doesn't change anything else. We just normally have to post notice if we move it.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Item 16.1, it's recommended the board enter executive session to consider the appointment of a public employee or official, to consider the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or student, to discuss details relative to the security arrangements and emergency response protocols for the Board of Education, and to discuss confidential information related to negotiations with other political subdivisions regarding requests for economic development assistance. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I think it was Steve, then Sherry. Very quick, though.
All right. Mr. Fuji?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorsch?
Yes.
Mr. Crowell?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Thank you all for viewing along at home tonight. We do not anticipate coming out of executive session to take any additional action this evening. Thank you very much.